could have been more ambiguous if Lana wanted it to be. But it's very direct. The light that is coming into the protagonist's heart is also going to be exuded outwards. Little vignettes of memories and thoughts, like a mosaic. There is a very apparent lack of lively diction. Let's talk about light imagery. The breaks in her heart are going to allow for light imagery to get in. It's so powerful what one phrase can do. Roadrunner, running away. Irony. California has a lot of mountains. Thank you for attending my geography class. This metaphor is very well thought out. Hi everyone, welcome to this video. On my channel, I analyze song lyrics very in depth through the lens of literary analysis. Today we're going to be analyzing the song Kintsugi by Lana Del Rey from her newest album, Did You Know There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard? I would love to know what your favorite song is from Lana's new album. Feel free to comment it down below. I will make sure to link all of my Lana Del Rey analyses below for you. We analyze quite a bit of Lana Del Rey on this channel, and there's more to come, so I would consider subscribing if I were you. Here's a list of literary terms I may refer to throughout this video, and as always, everything I say is just my own personal opinion. Music is of course very subjective, and I always enjoy hearing your own perspective down below in the comments. Also, I have a very important announcement to make. I'm going to be very vulnerable with you. I got bangs. Let's begin. There is a short interview that Rolling Stone UK posted with Lana Del Rey. I'm going to link it down below for you. It provided a lot of context for my analysis. In that interview, Lana talked about this song quite a bit, and I thought instead of consulting an actual dictionary, let's just let Lana Del Rey define this song title in her own words. Lana Del Rey stated, and I quote, "Kintsugi is the art of filling broken pottery with liquid gold in hopes of making it even more beautiful than it was before." And that's true. To provide a tiny bit more context, kintsugi is defined as the Japanese art of putting broken pottery pieces back together with gold. It's built on the idea that in embracing flaws and imperfections, you can create an even stronger, more beautiful piece of art. Lana went on to say that she almost doesn't need to explain that metaphor. She describes it as the idea of falling apart and rebuilding one's life even more beautifully. This is a very beautiful metaphor, and I feel like it is more present as we progress through the song. It builds on itself. So I just want to dive into verse 1, and we will talk about this metaphor as we move forward. Let's dive in. Verse 1. There's a certain point the body can't come back from. This song starts with a very direct statement. This is a sort of thing someone would say after they have experienced something or come to a very clear understanding about something. And again, my interpretation is honestly rooted a lot in the interview that I watched with Lana. She talked about how within a certain time period, 3 of her family members unfortunately passed away. I think that this song is referring to those events that occurred in her life. That is the context that I'm going to be approaching this song with. And I do want to state that although this seems to be a very personal song to Lana, and this could very much be autobiographical, we never know if a song is 100% autobiographical or not. So I always like to intentionally create some distance by using the word protagonist. You can interpret this first line as a little ominous. You can interpret it as a bit of a foreshadow. It really sets the tone and it sets expectations, in my opinion. If you watch my channel, you know how hard I stand diction. I think word choice is literally the most important thing ever. Even if you're not sitting down and analyzing a song very in depth like we do on this channel, you are going to be reacting to words in a specific way, subconsciously. So when I read the first line here, it's subconsciously setting the tone for me. In my opinion, the tone of any sort of writing guides your expectations. I'm expecting this song to perhaps be a little bit more somber. I'm expecting this song to discuss more serious subject matter. I also enjoy how this first line is kind of like a conclusion in a way. Again, it's a sort of statement someone would make, in my opinion, after they've experienced something or learned something. It's like we're being presented with the thesis statement, and then we're going to have all of the details and events that led to that understanding follow. I enjoy that sort of organization. I think it brings forth a feeling of stability because we're starting in a definite way, and then maybe we're going to have some more ambiguity and some more minute details to follow. I don't know, I just enjoy the emotional aspect of that. I think starting something with some more more umph, with some more stability, and then flowing downwards has a graceful connotation. I do view this song as very sad and very vulnerable, but there can be a lot of grace in that as well. I know I'm talking a lot about this first line, but I find it to be a sort of shocking first line, right? Because you wouldn't necessarily expect a song to start this way. In 1 year, we've learned the turn of the mouth. Okay, I want your opinion about this. I wasn't sure if turn of the mouth was an idiom that I wasn't aware of, so I literally Googled this. I Googled turn of the mouth idiom, and I couldn't find anything. Due to my very intense Google search, I'm going to be interpreting this more metaphorically. The way I'm interpreting this is a little graphic, and again, keep in mind, you don't have to think about this song the way that I am. Everything is open to interpretation. The way I'm interpreting this is guided by the subsequent lyric, which talks about the chest cavity. To me, turn of the mouth may be referring to something the protagonist witnessed during the passing of those family members. We're given a time frame, 1 year. I'm assuming that was the time frame in which the 3 deaths occurred. I think the turn of the mouth is something they observed, something that they might have seen. I think that's a very heavy way to interpret it. I think it's a very graphic way to interpret it. However, that's currently what's resonating with me personally. The fact that it says they've learned the turn of the mouth, it's kind of like they've been presented with this scenario so many times of witnessing this happening that they know it well, which is very dark and very heartbreaking. And again, my interpretation of turn of the mouth here is very much guided by the chest cavity lyric, which let's go ahead and dive into right now. It says, the depth that the chest cavity takes. This is a very interesting line. I spent a lot of time trying to dissect it because it made me feel a lot of feelings. The diction here is very important. When I think about the chest cavity, I don't think about it taking anything other than a breath. We don't ever really say that it's taking depth. In my opinion, the word breath has lively energy. The word depth to me has a hollow sort of energy. And I'm not thinking about like emotional depth or like someone being deep, like intelligent. That's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about like digging a hole sort of depth. It's kind of concave. There's a hollowness, there's an emptiness I associate with the word depth in this context. I associate the word breath with something rising, right? So these are opposing, in my opinion. There's a sort of opposition present with the way this lyric is crafted. I don't know how intentional it is. I personally believe that when we have a very skilled writer like Lana Del Rey, I think that they naturally state things in a way that connotes the emotions they want to connote. It's like second nature to them. That's how I personally think about it. So to me, there is some opposition here. I wouldn't ever really associate the word depth with chest cavity. I would associate a feeling of the rise of a breath. So to me, that's very ominous and very heartbreaking. I also want to comment on the word chest cavity because a cavity also makes me think about hollowness again, right? It's a more mechanical sort of diction. It's not lively at all. There is a very apparent lack of lively diction in this lyric. For me, I'm comparing the diction chest cavity with the word lungs. The word lungs, like the word breath, are more lively. I, for some reason, associate the color gray with the word depth and chest cavity in this context. I don't know why, I just am. I'm thinking about the color gray a lot. I don't think about like a darkness. Maybe I thought about that a little bit more when I analyzed the song Black Beauty. There's just a gray sort of energy that I associate with some of the diction here, which is interesting and also very sad. This lyric really makes the chest cavity in question here seem to be void of anything lively. The word take here also is striking to me because it's taking depth. So again, depth I view as something concave like this, and breath I view as rising. So they're taking something down. The chest cavity is taking something downward. To me, that may be representative of labored breathing or of irregular breathing. I associate a sense of struggle with the word depth and take in this context, and it makes me visualize something a little bit more graphic, perhaps something that was observed during this time period in regards to the family members in question that passed away. Again, I'm aware this is a pretty graphic way to interpret it, but this is what's making the sense for me, given the context. If you have any other ways of thinking about this lyric, please tell me down below. If you have like a more positive way to interpret it, I would love to hear that as well. Next, we have some context. It says, Chucky was there for 3 out of 3. Chucky is Lana's sister. I learned that when I analyzed Lana's song, Blue Banisters. I will link it down below for you. It's currently my longest analysis. I believe it's like an hour and a half, and yes, that's just for the song, not for the album. You guys clarified who Chucky was in the comments on that video, and for that I thank you because that was very helpful. But yes, we're given context here. Lana's sister was there for the 3 deaths. Lana did speak about the 3 people that passed away in the interview that I'm going to be linking down below for you. Next it says, I was there for the 3rd because I couldn't be there for the one who was closest to me. So it sounds like the protagonist here was only present for the 3rd passing. They're saying that they couldn't be there for the passing of the family member that they were the closest to. I want to just read a little further because I'm going to analyze this chunk together. It says, but I can't say I run when things get hard. It's just that I don't trust myself with my heart. I think there's a great deal of self-awareness in those few lines that I just read. The protagonist seems to be trying to explain herself and her actions. To me, it's a little bit heartbreaking that she feels the need to do this. Perhaps she doesn't want her absence to be perceived in a negative way because that wasn't what was going on. She wasn't present because she didn't care about that family member's passing. She's saying that she wasn't present because it would have been too much for her. She wasn't running away, but it was a form of self-preservation. She was just trying to protect herself. Again, she says, it's just that I don't trust myself with my heart. That's a sort of statement someone makes based on experience. They know the state of their heart and they know maybe what their heart can endure at that time and what thing could ruin them. It's just that I don't trust myself with my heart, but I've had to let it break a little more because they say that's what it's for. I want to briefly compare the heart with the soul. The soul for me, very briefly, is something that is spiritual and existential. It forms the core of your identity. I feel like the soul is very much protected. I talked a lot about how I define a soul in my analysis of Taylor Swift's song Coney Island. Link down below. For me, the soul is not something you can readily ruin. You know what I mean? It's very much stable and anchors you. The heart I view as purely emotional. It's like an emotional world, right? And within this emotional world of the heart, I think about platonic love, romantic love, self-love, love for things outside of yourself like hobbies, music, art, coding. I also think about the love you have for certain concepts, certain themes, certain metaphors, maybe social causes, things like that. Those are things that I associate with the heart. And I view the heart as naturally more dynamic and flexible than the soul. That's why I was so shook and concerned with the lyric in Taylor Swift's song Coney Island, which talked about breaking someone's soul. I was like, OMG, their identity is not okay right now. Existential vibes. I view the heart as naturally more elastic than the soul. I'm making this distinction because I think a lot of people define the heart and the soul as the same, which is totally fine, but I don't want to give that context for my interpretation. So with this lyric, when it's talking about the protagonist's heart, or saying that she had to let it break a little more because they say that's what it's for, to me this is talking about the purpose of the heart. It makes it seem like the purpose of the heart is to break. And I understand that because again, I view the heart as elastic and dynamic. I view it as something that has the ability to heal itself over and over again. It's kind of like the animals that can regrow their limbs. I think like an axolotl can do that, right? I think we learned about that in school. But the heart can break and heal and break and heal. I think it's a different idea with the soul. That's why I want to make that distinction. I find it really interesting and really satisfying to think about the purpose of one's heart. It's also interesting that it says they say that's what it's for. The protagonist isn't saying that she believes that's what the heart is for, to break a little sometimes, right? It's like she's creating distance between herself and this idea. And perhaps she's relying on the wisdom of other people to guide her through this time. They're saying that the heart is meant to break sometimes. So I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to trust that healing will come after the hurt. And notice the protagonist says she is letting her heart break a little more. This suggests that her heart perhaps is already broken a little bit. Sometimes when someone gets their heart broken, they may shut off their emotions, right? They're going to be numb. They're not going to feel anything, but they're not going to feel the pain either. It's a form of self-protection, and this could be done on purpose, consciously or subconsciously. Perhaps that's a little bit of what the protagonist went through, because she says she had to let her heart break a little more. It makes it seem like she had to consciously allow for her heart to break. She had to be vulnerable and allow herself to feel this. I really enjoy that there's self-reflection in these lyrics. This song is talking about a topic that's very heavy. And again, I just enjoy the progression here of the very definite and direct first lyric that sets the tone. And then we have some more graphic imagery, in my opinion. We have some context. And then we have the protagonist self-reflecting. It goes on a bit of a journey. I definitely do think this verse and this song follow a stream of consciousness sort of setup, which I really enjoy. Chorus. We have repetition of the lyric, that's how the light shines in, and then it says that's how the light gets in. Let's talk about light imagery. I talk about light imagery quite a bit on my channel. I almost always interpret light imagery as very positive, always depends on the context. Light illuminates things, right? Light is brightness. Light can represent things like clarity, healing, truth. When there's light everywhere, there are no shadowy corners. You can see everything clearly. You have awareness, you have power. Here, the protagonist is referring to her heart breaking. When we're talking about this metaphor of kintsugi, the piece of pottery that is broken is referring to the protagonist's heart. Her heart is breaking due to the events that happened, but the breaks in her heart are going to allow for light imagery to get into her. I love this metaphor so much because sunlight is golden and kintsugi fills the cracks in the pottery with gold. So this metaphor fits very beautifully with the sunlight, and I really, really enjoy that. To me, I think about the light as representing a few different things. I think about the light, again, as representing healing. I think it's going to allow the protagonist to shine internally for herself and heal herself and be in a better place emotionally and mentally. But I also think the breaks are going to allow for the light to shine outwards and also allow for other people to experience the protagonist's newfound brightness as well. To me, this chorus has a pretty positive tone. Again, there's a lot of light imagery. If you look at the diction, the word light is here 3 times. We can look at the diction shines. That's very positive. I also enjoy the phrase gets in. When I think about the word shine, I find it to be very beautiful and very positive, but you can see light shining from far away. If you're inside and there's a window, you can still see light shining. However, it's more diffused that way. But if the light is getting in, it seems more potent. It's like it's literally gaining access to the protagonist's heart. So to me, that's a sort of progression from the word shine to gets in. It's like the light is really getting in there into the depths of the protagonist's heart. And to me, that's positive because it's going to be a more concentrated sort of light, and it's going to be, again, more potent. It's going to heal her more beautifully. Verse 2. Verse 2 is recounting some more specifics from the events that occurred when this protagonist's family members passed away. In the interview with Rolling Stone UK, Lana talks a little bit more in depth about this. Lana talked about being around the bed of one of her family members, and she mentioned that she and 16 of her other family members were singing 4-part harmonies around the bed. That's what I'm thinking about when it says, so everyone was there, they were standing, laughing. So everyone here is referring to the protagonist's family. I want to draw your attention to the word so. I find that diction to be a little informal and casual. It's often a word that you would like edit out, right? If you want to make something pristine and perfect, you would edit out that word usually. However, I really like that it's here. I think that it's more conversational. It fits in with the stream of consciousness sort of structure that I'm associating with this song. And to me, the word so makes this more emotional because of the context it's in. It really is like a close friend is trusting you and being vulnerable with you. When someone is telling you a story and they're not like editing it, it's not like a TED Talk or something, it's not a speech, they're gonna talk like this. They're gonna say, so this happened and this happened and da 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 da. The word so here, I know it's literally just 2 letters, but to me, it brings in that more intimate conversational tone. And I think this makes the reader or the listener feel closer to the song. It makes it more intimate. It makes you listen in a little bit more because it's like your friend is telling you this. And also the emotional aspect of the word so, it kind of diminishes the intensity of all the emotions that may be associated with this. I talk about this a lot on my channel, how there's a lot of diction that you can use to diminish a very emotional thing. And you may do that for self-preservation purposes, or you may do that to just try to offset the intensity of certain emotions because it's simply too much to describe, maybe too painful to describe. To me, it's a little bit of a juxtaposition at times when words like this are used to lead into talking about emotional concepts. I just want to mention that I really enjoy that it's here. So everyone was there, they were standing, laughing. The protagonist says she was on the side with her tears streaming down. It's painting the picture for us. It's some imagery. There's something about the clutch of the wrist he thought was his, to carve into his mouth. I'm inclined to interpret those 4 lines as more graphic, again, similar to those more graphic lines I interpreted in verse 1. I think that this is something that perhaps happened with one of her family members that was passing away. Perhaps he clutched the protagonist's wrist, thinking it was his, and maybe he put it in his mouth. You could interpret that more metaphorically if you wanted to. I personally am viewing this a little bit more literally. It could be accumulation of things that were observed by the protagonist. However, I think about it as more graphic and just a very sad memory. And my interpretation of those lines in verse 1 are also guiding this interpretation here. I'm kind of hesitant to interpret this metaphorically. I usually do like to provide different avenues of thought for you guys so you can find value in the lyrics and interpret it in whatever way resonates with you. But I kind of don't want to interpret this metaphorically and break it down that way. To me, it seems a little invasive for me to do that, just personally. I think that this is so graphic that it's more respectful, again, from my perspective, to just interpret it as more literal. I think sometimes when there's something presented to you that could be literal and that is very emotionally heavy, I often find it disrespectful to try to make it abstract and like flowy. Do you know what I mean? I view metaphors as pretty flowy sometimes, and I love a good metaphor. If you watch my channel, you know this, but I think sometimes just accepting something as is more appropriate. And for some reason, that's how I feel about these lines here. I don't think it's appropriate for me to try to like pull out a metaphor from this. I think you could if you wanted to, and if that resonates with you, that's wonderful. I just don't feel like it's appropriate for me to do. If you have any thoughts about that, let me know down below. I do think what those 4 lines may be referring to are things the protagonist witnessed that made a big impression on her because of the line that says there's something about. I think the protagonist felt a lot of feelings when that happened. It may be something that sticks out in her memory. Then we have some more context. The protagonist says they only had hours. She couldn't stop crying. And she very explicitly says that when she saw someone passing away, she saw all of her own days flash in front of her. I kind of view this verse as little vignettes of memories and thoughts. It's like a mosaic that the protagonist experienced during that time period, and they're all being expressed here. Again, kind of in a stream of consciousness sort of setup. So we have like literal graphic memories here, and then we have the thoughts and emotions associated with that dispersed throughout the lyrics. Protagonist saying that she's thinking about her own life flashing in front of her is a very poignant and intense moment of self-reflection. There's just a whirlwind of things going on here internally for the protagonist, I would assume. I do appreciate how what's happening is being explicitly stated. I do respect that. I respect how it says that there's someone dying. I think that this could have been more ambiguous if Lana wanted it to be. This could have been more subtle, right? But it's pretty direct in telling you what this song is about. I love ambiguity. You guys know this. I love ambiguous lyrics. But there is something to be said about being very direct and letting people know what a song is about. I think that when a song is more personal to you, there may be times you want to be more explicit in what the song is about for your own personal reasons as well. I'm not trying to say that that's the reason Lana is more direct in this song. I'm extrapolating this out a little bit and just providing some commentary on some of my thoughts. But I do think it's interesting to think about songs where there's ambiguity and compare it to songs that are more direct. I think that could often be indicative of the emotional state of the songwriter, the way that they want the readers or the listeners to interpret the song. When we're faced with direct statements, that does have an emotional effect on us as well, and we might view the song as more poignant and more significant in a way. I think that this is also kind of respectful, right? there's some things, like I mentioned earlier, that you may not want to be metaphorical about. There's some things you may not want to be ambiguous and subtle about. Some things just are what they are, and you don't want to like make it flowy. You just want to state it. Those are the sorts of things I'm thinking about when I read this verse. And you think about who would be with you, and then there's Donahue. So the protagonist is reflecting on her own life, and she's thinking about the people that are present in her life and that will be present in her life. I think Donahue is referring to a particular person. If you Google that name along with Lana Del Rey, you will find pictures of her and perhaps a significant other or a former significant other. I don't necessarily know, and I'm not going to research that. I don't like bringing in people's personal lives into songs. I like to just respect everyone's privacy and not do that. So we're not going to get into that, but I do believe this is referring to a specific person in the protagonist's life. I'm going to assume that this is someone very important to them, especially because it's stated after the lyric, and you think about who would be with you. For some reason, I'm thinking this person was perhaps present there, because when I read and then there's Donahue, it kind of pulls me out of the protagonist's internal thoughts. It's like the protagonist is standing there thinking all of this, and then they look and Donahue is right there. They're thinking all of this, they're reflecting about their life and who's in their life, and then they have a moment where they step out of their thoughts and into the outer world, and they might look up and see them. That's what I'm thinking about when I read those lyrics. Bridge number 1. I interrupt this video with a very special message from myself. This is sponsored by me. I want to let you guys know that I'm offering services on the website Fiverr. I'm offering a few different things. I can help you refine your own analysis skills to develop your own unique perspective about poetry, about song lyrics, about any written work. I've also been getting a lot of messages from you guys letting me know that you use my videos to help you learn English. So if you need an English conversation partner, I'm your girl. We can converse through the internet. I can help you with pronunciation, sentence structure, and random things about American culture that are not super intuitive. If you're a songwriter or a poet and want me to read your original piece of work and provide you with a very detail-oriented feedback, I can do that as well. All that information is going to be linked down below. If you have any questions about any of the services I'm offering, please message me directly through the website Fiverr. Back to the video that you actually clicked here for. The first lyric says, "Daddy, I miss them." The diction here of the word daddy shows a great deal of vulnerability. It shows the depths of pain the protagonist is in. The protagonist is an adult woman, but perhaps she is hurting as a child would hurt, because this is talking about her family. Just that diction, the word daddy, and the whole phrase, "Daddy, I miss them," is so incredibly heartbreaking. I definitely commend Lana for being this vulnerable in her lyrics. These are things that you don't have to share, right? You don't have to talk about this in this way in a public space, but she's choosing to share this with us. And again, I'm trying to create distance by using the word protagonist, but still the diction here is very much reflective of the intensity of the pain the protagonist is feeling. We have that lyric repeated twice in this bridge. I always say that repetition signifies significance. To me, the repetition of "Daddy, I miss them" is really intensifying the vulnerability of the protagonist, and it's really showcasing the amount of hurt the protagonist is in. It's like the vulnerability of a child, and I'm not saying that in a weak way at all. I am saying that this is like a child because this is her family. A lot of people are different around their family because it's their family. Everyone's family dynamic is different. It makes me think about this protagonist as a young child. Wow, these family members were still alive, and that may have been a time frame in which she would call her father daddy because she's a little girl. That line perhaps calls back a lot of memories for the protagonist. It's how she used to call her father when all of these people were alive and when they would all be together. I feel like there's a whirlwind of memories that come with this lyric. It takes you back in time for a moment, and it makes you think about the memories that the protagonist may be replaying. All of those are flashing in front of her. It's so powerful what one phrase can do. There's so many different ways to think about this. I'm in the mountains. I'm probably running away from the feelings I get when I think all the things about them. The protagonist could literally be in the mountains. It's giving some mild Blue Bannister's music video vibes. I did analyze that music video. I will link it down below if you're interested. If this is more metaphorical, we can think about the mountains as connoting seclusion, not isolation, seclusion. Seclusion has a more positive connotation situation in my opinion. It brings with it a feeling of healing as well. I associate a lot of nature with the mountains, so again, that promotes healing as well. I do think the protagonist is literally in the mountains because Lana's protagonists are often living in California. California has a lot of mountains. Thank you for attending my geography class. It sounds like the protagonist is in the mountains intentionally. She says she's probably running away from her feelings. The word probably is interesting. It's a conditional sort of word. Again, it diminishes the feelings of the protagonist a little bit because they might be so intense. Instead of saying that she's running away from her feelings, she says she is probably running away from her feelings, right? It makes it seem more casual and more chill. It's like the word so that I mentioned earlier. This isn't showing a lack of emotion. It's showing that there's so much emotion that we need some diction that's a little bit more conditional to take the edge off. The protagonist here is running away from herself. I talked about the concept of running away from the self when I analyzed Lana Del Rey's song Ride. It'll be linked down below for you. I do not interpret this song as being similar to Ride at all. I think they're about different things. However, this is a slightly similar mini theme of running away from the self when I think all the things about them. The diction, I think all the things, is simple yet so heavy. When I say phrases are simple, I mean that as a compliment because it's very difficult to write in a concise and simple way that still conveys emotion. And I find the phrase, I think all the things about them, as being so heartbreaking. There is a simplicity here that to me is juxtaposing the intensity of emotions behind the words. And to me, that sort of juxtaposition is just gut-wrenching. Honestly. We have repetition of Daddy, I Miss Them. I'm at the Roadrunner Cafe. This is a literal place in LA, so the protagonist could have literally been at the Roadrunner Cafe. But I do find this very ironic because the protagonist is running away and she's at the Roadrunner Cafe. Get it? Roadrunner, running away. Irony. I'm probably running away from the thoughts in the day. So the protagonist is running away from a lot of internal things, from her emotions, her feelings, and from her thoughts. It sounds like the thoughts are occurring during the day, which to me is more intense because oftentimes we get in our emo vibes at night. You're off of work, things are more quiet, you have some more time to yourself, things are settling down, so the emotions flow out. But the protagonist is dealing with a lot of thoughts during the day as well, which is often a busier time. To me, this signifies the emotional and mental state of the protagonist. They're going through a lot right now. They're not just thinking things at night, but also during the day. I'd have things to do with them, but they say, when it says I'd have things to do with them, I think it's referring to the thoughts the protagonist is having during the day. Maybe throughout the day, she's thinking, you know what, right now she could give this person a call and maybe they could go out to coffee, but she doesn't have that option to anymore. The last line here that's gonna lead into the next verse says, but they say, and again, I wanna draw your attention to the word they. This is creating distance between the protagonist and what's about to be said, and it makes me think that what is going to be said is wisdom from the past. Perhaps the protagonist is leaning on wisdom outside of herself to try to get through this very difficult period. Sometimes you're hurting so deeply and you're so full emotionally that the words and wisdom of others may serve as a safe metaphorical place. Then we have the chorus again. It's repetition of the lyric, that's how the light gets in. And it's a little bit different from the first chorus because we don't have the diction shine. I do think the diction shine is very positive and wonderful. However, you know how I feel about the phrase get in. I feel like it's representative of a more potent form of the sunlight. So I really like that diction. And the chorus is referring to what they say. It's the ancient wisdom. We do have repetition here, right? I know it's the chorus and most choruses and most songs often have repetition, but again, I say that repetition has significance. It's kind of like a mantra. That's how I think about it. Since the protagonist may be relying on wisdom from others during this time, perhaps this is an internal mantra the protagonist has adopted to try to get through this difficult time period. That's how the light gets in, that's how the light gets in, right? And this goes hand in hand with the metaphor within this song. Verse 3. The protagonist says she thinks by the 3rd of March she was cracked open. So if we remember from earlier in the song, the protagonist was allowing her heart to break a little more, suggesting it was already broken before. And then by March 3rd, I love the specificity of that date. Again, creates more intimacy and more vulnerability. But by that date, the protagonist believes she was cracked open completely. In addition to the specificity of March 3rd, it also feels like, again, a journal entry, a diary entry. It feels like the protagonist is aware. She's tracking her healing. The protagonist is now very explicitly aligned with the pottery that is part of this metaphor, kintsugi. She, like the pottery, is completely cracked open. And this is where the healing is really going to start becoming apparent. This is where the light imagery is really going to come through. When it says the ground was cold, I think that's referring to where the loved ones were buried after they passed away. If you want to view it as more metaphorical, you can interpret this as perhaps the presence of emotional distance. So there's emotional distance, the ground was cold, meaning the protagonist was a little bit further away from the events emotionally and maybe time-wise, that she was able to go into the next phase of healing or actually start healing. The word finally is also very important to consider here. It's showing that there is a moment of transition occurring. Brought by the sunlight of the spirit to pour into me. The sunlight here, metaphorically, is aligned with the gold lacquer that is used to piece the broken pottery together in kintsugi. This metaphor is very well thought out in this song. Everything in the protagonist's life is being aligned with kintsugi. It's a pretty clean cut metaphor. It's very apparent in my opinion. The word spirit here could be referring to God. It could be referring to the universe, whatever the protagonist believes in. It's something that is very spiritual, hence the word spirit, and it's the sunlight of the spirit. To me, this is making nature seem more spiritual, and if you have seen literally any other one of my videos, you know how hard I stan nature imagery. I do believe there to be a lot of ancient wisdom in nature. It's very lively, it's very beautiful. So to me, the fact that we have a word connoting spirituality, word spirit, being aligned with sunlight, which I view as a part of nature, I really do enjoy that. It makes this lyric seem more meaningful and more valuable in a way as well. To me, there's a lot of elements to this lyric. We have, of course, the metaphor of kintsugi really present in this lyric. We have sunlight, so we have light imagery, but then we also have nature imagery. And we have spirituality as well. I also think the phrase pour into me is very important. When you pour something in, you're pouring a pretty decent amount of a liquid usually into something. The word pour isn't usually associated with a small volume of anything, right? It's usually a decent volume of something you're pouring. So to me, it seems like there is a decent amount of sunlight being poured into the protagonist, into her heart, right? And there's a little bit of a sadness to that phrase because when I hear the word pour, I think about emptiness. It's as if the protagonist is so empty that she has a lot of room for things to be poured in. There is some hollowness present, some emotional hollowness, and maybe even spiritual hollowness. And that's why there is so much room for the sunlight to be poured in. I am happy though that we have light imagery, we have sunlight being poured in. Not any dark imagery, right? What is being given to the protagonist by the spirit here is something that will ultimately heal her and will make her stronger and better. I do think there is a slight opposition present if we are to compare this lyric to the one previous. So the one previous stated, finally the ground was cold, they wouldn't open. It's like that, not chapter, but that time frame in the protagonist's life of being very perhaps distraught and overcome with emotion. That chapter is coming to a bit of a close and now the healing can perhaps begin. So we have the diction, wouldn't open. But in the lyrics right after, where it says, brought by the sunlight of the spirit to pour into me, we have a lot of openness. The openness is caused by breakage, but it's still open, right? So we have wouldn't open, and then we have pour into me, which suggests a sort of openness. So to me, there is a very distinct transition being discussed within these lyrics here, and it's kind of a soft closing of one chapter and the start of a chapter of healing. There are a lot of stages of things like grief and healing and working through trauma. It's not like a clean cut sort of chapter, but there are different stages that you may go through. It's different for every person. I'm generalizing this a lot. There's a lot more nuance to it, but I do think about that sort of transition and process when I look at these few lyrics here. Then the protagonist says there's a name for it in Japanese. It's kintsugi. She's explicitly stating what this song is metaphorically aligned with, which I enjoy. They sang folk songs from the 40s, even the 14-year-old knew. Froggy came a courtin'. How do my blood relatives know all of these songs? I think this is referring to the protagonist's family. Again, in that Rolling Stone UK interview, Lana talked about her family singing around the bedside in the hospice, and I think that's exactly what this is referring to. Froggy Came a Courtin' was probably one of the songs that they sang. This is a very distinct and specific memory that's being mentioned here. The protagonist is thinking, how do my blood relatives know all of these songs? It's a sort of commonality that is linking all these relatives together, right? They all know these songs very well. They all sing these songs together. It's a common thread between them. The protagonist then says, I don't know anyone left to know the songs that I sing. That's really sad, right? This is showcasing some more self-reflection on part of the protagonist. Before I get into this, I also want to draw your attention to the diction, the word blood relatives. To me, it's making the bond between her family seem stronger. Relatives is a word that is describing family members, but blood relatives seem more closely linked. I think the addition of that qualifier, the word blood, in front of relatives makes a family unit seem stronger and more united. It also brings forth a feeling of camaraderie and loyalty, in my opinion. So I think just the addition of the word blood here is very significant. It has a very big impact on how you may interpret the lyrics here. I really do think about a united sort of front and a lot of support. The protagonist here perhaps felt a lot of support and love when all the family members came together for the other family members that were passing away. While they were singing these songs, she may have noticed that, wow, like we have this in common. We know these songs, we sing them together. What a beautiful thing. And now that she had 3 family members pass away, she's thinking about how there's less people that know those songs now, right? There's 3 less. She's thinking ahead a little bit as well, I would assume. The songs here that they sang, I am interpreting them as something very positive and beautiful and intimate that these blood relatives share with one another. But when something is special between a smaller group of people, when that group becomes even smaller, you notice the emptiness more. You know what I mean? You notice their absence more. The protagonist mentioned previously how her own life flashed before her eyes and she's thinking about these sorts of things now. And I assume she's also thinking forward decades down the line about how the number of people that share knowledge about these songs are going to dwindle as well. She's forecasting into the future a little bit and thinking about those sorts of things. There's a sense of loneliness I associate with that last lyric of this verse. It's a sort of emotional isolation that I think it's referring to. Then we have the chorus again. It's repetition of the lyric, that's how the light gets in. Again, I think about this as a mantra due to the repetition. It's like a reminder that the protagonist perhaps keeps stating over and over to remind herself that this is a process. The fact that her heart is broken is going to allow for light to come in and heal her and make her stronger and even more beautiful. And then we have the second bridge. The word but is new here, right? We already had Daddy, I Miss Them repeated in the first bridge, but now we have the word but in front here. To me, the word but is significant because if we look at the verse previous, it was the chorus. The chorus in this song has positive vibes. It has a positive connotation, one of hope. It says that's how the light gets in. So the protagonist is acknowledging that she's going to become stronger and better in the chorus. Then in the bridge, despite all of that, she's still in pain. That's why she says, but Daddy, I miss them. Even though she's healing and there's a lot of light imagery associated with her healing process, she still misses her family members. There are repeated lyrics here from the first bridge, so I'm not going to interpret them again because I wouldn't necessarily interpret them in a different way. We do have some new lyrics here in the snow-capped mountains of the desert. This is interesting. This could be literal. I'm assuming this protagonist is in California, and in California, you have a lot of different climates. You have the beach, which is very warm, but you also have mountains where it could be snowing. So you could literally go like snowboarding and surfing in the same day if you wanted to. So the deserts could have snow-capped mountains. It could be a literal thing, a literal memory, something the protagonist observed and she's including in this bridge. Or this could be more of a juxtaposition moment and a moment of opposition. You wouldn't expect snow to be associated with the desert. You would associate dryness and heat with the desert, not snow and coldness. So we could have that bit of opposition present. Whenever there is a juxtaposition or an opposition, I often interpret that as being reflective of an internal state of the protagonist. We know that this protagonist's internal state is not super positive yet, right? Which is 100% understandable. For me though, I just think of this as more literal. I don't necessarily want to interpret that lyric as a juxtaposition. I just think it's context. The other new lyric says, I've been meaning to say that there's nothing to do except know that this is and then it's going to go into the outro. The end of this bridge that I just read, I think is showcasing another moment of transition. The protagonist perhaps has been trying to make sense of some things and trying to do certain things or think a certain way to make this process of grief and healing easier. But when it says there's nothing to do except no ... I think it's the protagonist kind of surrendering to the process and letting the process take its time and do what it needs to do by itself. I do think about this as a little bit of a surrender, but in a positive way. She's letting her internal state take over and heal itself on its own, which I find very beautiful. I'm gonna read the last part of the second bridge because I think it flows very beautifully into this outro. Probably running away, I've been meaning to say that there's nothing to do except know that this is outro, how the light gets in. I would argue that the light that is coming into the protagonist's heart now is also going to be exuded outwards. I think that they are going to shine bright in a metaphorical sense, emotionally, spiritually, etc., and that other people will see this brightness as well. People outside the protagonist will associate the protagonist with beautiful light imagery now. Like cracking, the light gets in, repetition of that's how the light gets in, then you're golden. We have a lot of repetition in this outro. The addiction golden I think is very important because I associate the word golden with the golden rays of sunlight. That to me makes the light imagery here even stronger, even more positive. The healing is more intense. Just another folk song, but anyway, that's an interesting line. I think it may be referring to the songs that the protagonist would sing with her blood relatives, and maybe even to this song. You can interpret it in either way. I kind of think both ways could be true. It has a double meaning. At least that's what resonates with me. The phrase "but anyway" is interesting because it's diminishing the importance of the folk song in a way. I think about the folk song lyric as perhaps being emotionally heavy for the protagonist in a way because it's associated with the songs that her blood relatives know that not everyone else knows. We talked about the emotional aspect of that a little bit earlier, and in a way she's also writing her own folk songs. Perhaps that's why I interpret that lyric as having emotional weight to it. So when it says "but anyway," it's what I've talked about all throughout this song. It's a sort of self-preservation. You're using diction to diminish the intensity of a feeling and of an emotion because it's too much. And sometimes when you are presented with a heavy emotion or heavy thought, you may want to shoo it away because you're not mentally prepared to dive into that heaviness. So I think about that when I look at that lyric here. I would love to know what you think about that lyric. Feel free to share it with me down below in the comments. I try so hard, but that's okay. I think the protagonist is trying hard to be okay. Remember when I talked about a soft sort of surrender in the previous verse in the second bridge? I think about that here again. I think the protagonist was able to surrender a little bit to the process, but she does acknowledge that she's trying really hard. And I think she's just trying to heal harder and to do right, perhaps by her family members, to really navigate this whole process the best she can. I really love how she says, "but that's okay." I think this is referring to her really trying, but having to surrender to the process. When it says, "but that's okay," I think this is a sort of self-forgiveness, perhaps forgiving herself for not grieving the way she wanted to or healing as fast as she wanted to. And again, please keep in mind, I'm just extrapolating this out. I'm not commenting on Lana Del Rey's life specifically. I feel like that's disrespectful for me to do, to try to analyze her emotions. I'm extrapolating this out and talking about a protagonist. Then we have repetition of "it's how the light gets in." I want to draw your attention to the first word of the last three lines, "it." Before this, in the chorus, we had the word "that." That's how the light gets in. Now we have "it's how the light gets in." To me, those two words have different connotations. When I think about the word "it," it feels more concrete than "that." Because when we say, "look at that over there," we're usually talking about something further away from you. But when we're like, "hey, look at it," to me, it seems like it's something more concrete and closer to you, just spatially. I find the word "it" to be, again, more concrete, more definite. It feels more certain. There's a connotation of certainty I associate with the word "it." To me, it's like the protagonist is now fully convinced of the statement about the light getting in. So for me personally, that change and that diction is very significant, and that's how the song ends as well. So it makes me think that the song is ending with the protagonist coming to a concrete understanding about something, and that's literally because of the word "it" and me comparing it to the word "that." Again, just my opinion, just how I feel about it. I would love to know what you think, as always, down below. And that is the end of this song. Overall, I think this song is very beautiful. It's very emotional, pretty heavy, and it's very vulnerable. I do associate this song with a stream of consciousness, and I love lyrics like that. I love lyrics that seem like they're journal entries. I find them to be very intimate. The whole metaphor of kintsugi, I think, is presented very beautifully in this song. Love the light imagery, love the fact that the sun is being aligned with the gold lacquer that is used in kintsugi. I think that's very reflective of the type of healing the protagonist is going to experience. We don't have a lot of dark imagery present here, but I would imagine that what the protagonist has gone through can be described with sorts of dark imagery. So I love the abundance of light imagery within the chorus of this song and within the outro. I view that as very positive and very beautiful. I would love to know what you think about this song and this new album down below in the comments. Please feel free to share your thoughts. My tutoring and consulting services are also linked down below. Feel free to check it out. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Bye!